Is the light on? Okay.
I would like to call the meeting in order. Josh, you want to make a quick call, please?
Yes. Connie Otten,
Yeah.
Deb White,
Here.
Shinwar Mai,
Here.
Mikhail Pauline Normandin,
Here.
Willard Yellowbird, Heather Keeler.
Here.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Moorhead Human Rights Commission. This is my first meeting as a chairperson. I also need your help here. Moorhead Human Rights Commission is holding its scheduled meeting using virtual meeting technology under an emergency declaration due to the COVID-19 restrictions. I am in the City Council chamber with the Vice Chair, and the other commissioners are attending remotely. Any public comment received prior to the meeting will be read as part of the record during applicable agenda item. The public may participate during the meeting by calling 218-299-5001. It's 218-299-5001. Your comment may be taken by a staff member, or you may request that your call be preached to the meeting in session. This is not a deal, but we are responding to our community current circumstances. The purpose of this commission is to secure for all persons, whether residents or visitors, equal opportunity in education, employment, housing, public accommodations, and public service, and full participation for all Moorhead citizens in affairs of this community. The Commission shall advise the Mayor, City Council, and City Manager on human relations and civil rights, issue a recommendation to the Mayor, City Council, and City Manager the adoption of such specific policies or actions as are needed to provide for full equity opportunity for our community. We are providing safe space to discuss race and incidents of hate speech or discrimination. We are here to listen and gather information. The Human Rights Commission will compile what's learned and discuss recommendations to the City Council for change that are within the control of the local government. Your sharings gives us an opportunity to find out what you are experiencing. As this is a public meeting, we could encourage everyone address the group to avoid calling out specific by name. As recommending body, we can't directly address all of the concerns we hear about at the session, at the listening session. We can provide referrals for resources that may be able to address certain circumstances and work to lift up concerns on those who make policy. Okay. Okay, our next item is approve of agenda. Any discussions or any change, please? If not, can I get a motion to approve, please?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve Deb White.
I did.
Commissioner Keeler, I second.
Keeler, second. Any further discussions? All in favor, please say aye.
Now, I will, for this part, I'll call individually by name to get approval.
Okay.
Connie Otten,
Yeah.
Deb White,
Yes.
Shinwar Mai, Shinwar? I'll come back to you. Heather Keeler,
Yes.
you might be having technical difficulties, but
Okay.
you've got 4.
Any citizens to be heard?
Did we call Mikal?
McKell?
Yes.
Welcome, Miguel.
So the motion was approved. We can move on, I think.
Okay, the motion is approved. The next item will be citizens to be heard. We can go to the next item.
You can move on. We haven't had any calls yet.
Community conversation. We are going to have a community conversation by July 1st. You want to talk more about that, Hale, please?
What do you want me to talk about? Willard?
The sorry?
Willard? What did you ask me?
Do you want to talk about the community conversation we're going to have 1st of July?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm going to start with a citizens to be heard piece. I just want to kind of make a statement to everybody who's here and who's logging on, from council members to city members to our law enforcement who are here. I just kind of want to make a statement that as we're asking our citizens and community members to come forth to share their stories, that we're really mindful in the space in which we enter to hear these stories. I know that it gets really difficult for some people to share in spaces like this. You know, I know that myself and Connie and other commission members hear these stories in the community. I know that we want people to come forward and share with us some of the situations that they've been in. I just want to make sure that as we're listening to these stories, that we're listening to them in a space of an open heart, an open mind, and the ability to know that we have to grow and we need to change together. This is not meant to be a super defensive place. We want to be a welcoming space that people can share some of the most difficult situations that they've been in. I know that for myself and for my family, there's been specific incidences. And so, you know, if people call in, whether it's today or at our other community conversations, just please remember to enter into this space really with an open heart and an open mind and willingness to listen. I just kind of wanted to say that first. So we're setting the stage for anybody who will be sharing their stories. As far as what we kind of have set up, the idea is that this is not the only time and space to hear these stories. We know that people in our community have different obligations, different times of the week, and so we wanted to create a space where we have multiple opportunities to have community conversations. So July 1st, same phone number, same links are shared on the city page. From noon to 1, we'll be here listening to stories, suggestions, and conversations, and then again from 6 to 7 p.m. If this is something that we see as beneficial for our community moving forward, we can look at further dates. But I think in this space, we need to make the motion to approve that those meetings take place, or we're good with that, okay. But I will ask, it's not mandatory that other city human rights commissioners are there, but it would be nice if more can attend. I know that Connie and I have committed to be at those 2 meetings as well. And so if you know of people in the community who this might be beneficial for them, please continue to share the information. Thank you. What else did you want me to say about it?
All right, that's enough.
Okay.
Thank you. I think I jump item number 5, civil rights discussions.
Well, and we didn't have any citizens register to speak. I don't know if there's any conversation you wanted to have amongst yourselves on this topic at this point, but we don't have any citizens to be heard at this point for this.
Thank you, Josh. Item number 7, law enforcement liaison update.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Sergeant Chris Martin, Moorhead Police Department, liaison with the Human Rights Commission. I have a couple of dates to give, and then also I want to let everybody know that I'll be part of the community conversations as well. So if there's specific questions for law enforcement that come up during those conversations, I'll be there to help address them and answer them. And if I'm not able to answer them at that point, hopefully by the 6 o'clock session, I'll have an answer, and you can join us again at 6 o'clock so I can address them. One of the things that has come up in some of the past conversations that we've had as a couple of the smaller groups have got together was how do individuals actually file a complaint with the Moorhead Police Department? And I thought I'd go over that and share that with the commission and for our viewers as well. A couple of different ways that complaint can be filed. First, we always have the option of calling in and speaking to a sergeant or the shift supervisor for the day. And that would just be calling the police department and asking for the supervisor. A couple of other ways, and a couple of ways that I would suggest is, one of them is if you don't want to come into the police department, we have our City of Moorhead website, and I think it's going to come up on the screen here. I'll just wait till it's actually there so everybody can see what the process would be. This is our City of Moorhead homepage, and we have a couple links directly from the homepage. If you go over to departments, like is just highlighted now, and go down to police and click on that, that'll take you to the police department main homepage. Over on the top left-hand portion, you'll see it highlighted here in a second. It says about the police department. We click on that, and that'll open a couple more links. Once that disappears here. So then it goes down to file a complaint or accommodation, which is highlighted, and we again click on that link, and that'll take you to our accommodation and complaint form. It gives a little description of the accommodation complaint form. It also gives you the option of calling into the police department, and it provides the phone number to call in if you would prefer to do that. Then it goes into kind of the information that's obtained or that you're going to provide for the complaint. It talks about, you can see the incident date, approximate incident time. If you don't know, just give the best information that you can to the time and the location. It's going to ask specifically for the employee's name. If you don't know the name of the employee, that's fine. We can either go by name, we can go by badge number, or that larger box with just below that would be a chance to identify the employee by maybe the squad number that they were in or what they looked like, giving some indicators, kind of what call it was, so that the sergeant or the lieutenant can look up the information and gather more information on the incident. Next, it goes down to your information. You can remain anonymous. Oftentimes, it's much more helpful for us to be able to contact you and gather more information and get some clarifying information. We also like to contact the person that is making the complaint. Typically, our contact will happen within 40 or within 24 hours. It's probably going to be less than the 24 hours where we're going to give you a call and let you know that we received your complaint and that we're working on it and ask if there's any additional information. But again, you can remain anonymous. I would suggest leaving your name and contact information, but it's not necessary. It just helps us gather more information about the specific event. As we go down a little bit further, it's going to start asking for the details of the specific incident, what it is that you're reporting to us. And then to receive a copy of the submission, you can email or leave your email address, and it'll email you a submission copy as well. That would be our process for the online complaint. The other process, and maybe what's more traditional, is for citizens to come into the police department and fill out a complaint form right at the lobby of the police department. Most often, a supervisor will be there, will come up to the police department to meet with you at that time. If you choose not to meet with them, that's always your option as well. But if the supervisor's there, they'll come up, they'll meet with you. They may ask you a few more questions if you're comfortable providing that information. And I can suggest too, if you're not comfortable coming in, you always have the option of coming in with another family member, an advocate for yourself, or an attorney, and have them present during the time that the complaint is being filed. Once that complaint is filed, if the sergeant or patrol supervisor isn't there, again, they're going to give you a call if you left your contact information to gather some more information, but also to let you know the complaint is being looked into. It's the start of the process. They may be able to give you a time frame that I'm going to work on this tonight, or they may be able to answer some of the questions in regards to the complaint, that this is why the officer responded that way, or maybe why they didn't respond in a certain way, and try to answer some of your questions in regards to that. That's pretty much the beginning of our process. After that, that's when the supervisor, sergeant, or lieutenant would begin looking into the actual complaint. We ask the information earlier on about what actually took place in the incident so that we can look up the call for service, and if there is video or audio that needs to be reviewed, that would be the time that the supervisor then begins to review those parts of the incident. Are there any questions from the commissioners in regards to, or the public, anybody else in regards to the complaint process? I do have a couple other things that I'd like to update if we have a little more time, but I'm free for questions on the complaint process.
For sure, you have more time. You can go ahead if you want.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next thing I wanted to update, I usually give an update on our police activity program, our PAIL program. Due to COVID-19, we have not been as active as we normally would. We normally would have had several different activities going on. At this point, we've had to really scale that back just because of the contact that we're limited to. We did, however, have one event in May where we worked with citizens of Moorhead and some businesses of Moorhead, where we had bicycles donated, and we used those bicycles in conjunction with Moorhead schools, who had staff members, teachers, and counselors identify some elementary and middle school students that needed some bicycles. So we were able to get 16 bicycles delivered out to them around the end of May. The program seemed to go over well, so we are actually going to try it again here, hopefully very soon. Bikes are very hard to come by right now. So these bikes aren't new bikes, but they're reconditioned bikes that we have a local bike dealership that's able to help us out with reconditioning them if they need be, but getting them out to some of these kids was important. So we're working on that, and we're going to have another program of that set up hopefully this summer. And then the last thing I wanted to update you about, and maybe some of you have already seen it, is that we have a new wellness coordinator that is embedded within the police department now. It's Dr. Aaron Samua Folkerts from MSUM. He is a counselor and professor over there, and last fall he started working with our department. Had to again scale back some of what he was doing due to COVID-19, but now he's again beginning to work with us and work with our officers, and specifically with our new officers as they start some of the training programs next week. And he's also going to be going out and riding around with some of our officers on a weekly basis and going to calls with them as well. So we're very excited to have him up and running with us. If you have access to our Facebook site, he has done a couple posts on there introducing himself to the community through our Facebook site. So I am open for questions if anybody has something for me.
Thank you, Krish. I think Heather will have question, and as well as the other commission, but I have one question too about complaint. Who can see the complaint? I mean, is all the police officer can see the complaint including the officer that I'm complaining against, or is there specific people who can follow up the complaint so the people will feel more comfortable?
Very good question. So the complaint is not shown to, it's not shown to all the officers. The individuals that have access to it are the supervisor that is investigating it. And then it moves up through our administrative review process at that point, going from the sergeant to lieutenant up to either the captain or deputy chief, and then reviewed by the chief of police as well. We don't provide the officer with a copy of the complaint unless there's going to be some form of discipline that's implemented. From that, we do interact with the officer and talk to them, and if there's coaching or counseling that's advised, then we will do that with them as well and talk to them about the complaint. But it's not open to the officers. We don't have a file that officers can access and look at the complaints that would have came in for this year or for 2019 or prior years before that.
Thank you. Either you have a question or anyone else in the commission?
Yes, I have a couple questions because I always have questions. But okay, so with the form,
You can go ahead.
okay. This is getting really confusing. Okay, so my question is, first, just the access to the form. You went through like 5, 6 different steps, for somebody from the general public to be able to file a complaint. Like, is there a way that we can streamline that, whether it's even, connected as one of our links on the Human Rights Commission page? Is it something that can be on the front, like, home screen of our police page? I just feel like when you have to click and click and click and do this searching to find it, that in itself is going to eliminate people from doing it. Also, there's just so much information, and I'm going to give an example of a community member who reached out to me about an incident that happened in Moorhead just in the last week. Because there was a threat that people want to take her children, she doesn't want to come forward, but I feel like it's a really good example of something that has happened. So she got pulled over. Our law officer looked through her car, and then when she asked him for his badge number, the response was, "I'm not going to give it to you. You'll have it on the ticket when it comes in the mail." So, what is the responsibility that our police officers have, that if they're asked that by our community members, it's an obligation for them to give that information to us? Because, like, the badge number is pretty small on the badge. If, if they're asked, I feel like there should be an obligation that they need to give that to the citizen and the community member, rather than kind of having, that's not an ideal response that I think our community would want to have. So I guess, what's your take on, those are two kind of different questions, but what is your take on the accessibility to the form and what we can do to update that so it's more readily available, but then also what is the officer obligation to give the badge number?
Good questions. I'll start in reverse order. So the obligation is there for the officer to identify themselves. We do have our name and our badge number on our uniform. However, it's not always as viewable as maybe some other things that are on the uniform, and they are in varying different sizes. Some of the names are almost in like inch wide font. Other ones are just on the small, very tiny nameplate. But if officers are asked for their badge number, they are to provide the badge number to the citizen. If that individual wants to, that specific individual wants to either give myself a call or call into the police department and inquire about that, I'd be more than happy to go back and review the traffic stop and look up the actual incident and see what was said and what the conversation was, but have them either give me a call or they can work through you to contact me in regards to that. And the second portion about the accessibility, I'm not sure about putting the complaint form or the link on the Human Rights Commission. It's not something that we have done before. I'm not opposed to it. Part of the reason why I was going through the different options is I realized that not everybody has access to a computer. Maybe not everybody has access to a cell phone. So I wanted to give them the 3 different options of filing the complaint so that they know, but also so that other members know. So if something does come up and you're asked about it or another commissioner's asked about it, you can let them know. If you can't find the form online, you have the option of calling or actually going in person and completing the form in person and speaking with the supervisor at that point. But I did take a note in regards to the suggestion for having the link on the HRC website.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up the question. So if an individual in our community gets stopped and they feel uncomfortable about the situation, you know, it's a small enough community that I know that there's this genuine fear that if I complain against our law enforcement officers and I have to give my name and my address and all the information, and they know what kind of car I drive, and they know the area in which I live, you know, there's an honest fear then that people have that now they're going to be profiled even more than they maybe originally were in the first stop. What guarantees do we have in place that, you know, if they continue to get pulled over and there's a comment made, you know, how many complaints can somebody make before there's actual action taken in some of these profiling incidences?
There wouldn't be a set number. It would be based on what the complaint was and what the results of the investigation would have been in regards to the initial complaints and the following complaints. What I can say is that if somebody wants to file a complaint, again, they're not required to provide their name or their vehicle information or any other identifiers. It helps us as an investigator, a supervisor, to actually follow up on the complaint, to look into it, and then also to get back to the individual that was complaining and let them know that this is what we found out, and to answer some of their questions and to let them know that this is what was happening, or that maybe this is why it happened, or to invite them to look at the video and see what happened. Because at times, things, even when I get pulled over, I can be a little nervous and I may not remember everything that took place, and a second set of eyes or looking at the video may help refresh some of my memory as to what took place. But again, they don't have to provide their name, they don't have to provide their number. That's just so that we can do a more in-depth investigation. If they choose to provide it, that would be their choice.
Okay, thank you.
Deb has a question.
Deb, do you have any question, please?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, first I wanted to mention one thing that just in regard to the form and your role, Sergeant Martin, on the commission as the liaison, that another starting point could be that people reach out to the Human Rights Commission, but there's a limitation on what we can do. But one of the things I wanted to share that we've talked about before is that while you attend our meetings, you've also, let us know that you are there when, at our discretion, and if there was a time where someone was uncomfortable, for instance, that you would be mindful and respectful of that. And so if there was someone who, had some concerns and wanted to bring it to Human Rights Commission, that's another place that they could use as a starting point. Not that we could fill out forms or anything for them, but just another place for people that make them feel supported. So I wanted people to know that while you are a liaison, you also are mindful of that you'll be at meetings when it's appropriate, but if people are, would rather speak without you there, that you're also respectful of that too. So just wanted to get that out. And I also wanted to just ask about, you mentioned some of the outreach things, and clearly with the COVID-19, that's really put a crimp on a whole lot of different things. And I know we talked before this about different outreach activities, like doing some community picnics and things to really help build those relationships between our local law enforcement and the police. And I just wondered if there's been some discussion, or even if we could, if people had ideas of just some things that could happen that would allow those to occur, even so we are restricted in what we can do. And along those lines, have you heard anything about Night to Unite and whether we'll be able to do anything with that?
Thank you so much, Deb. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, could I have a minute just to address some of Commissioner White's questions?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So as far as Night to Unite goes, I believe we've had to postpone that for this year with everything that's going on with the COVID. If my information is incorrect, I will update the commission as soon as possible with that. We have not moved forward with further conversations about any activities that we can do as far as outreach, mainly because we've ended up canceling more events than moving forward with them. As you know, we've started to do the longest table event, wanted to continue on with that this year, and unfortunately we were not able to do that after having a successful kickoff last year. But hopefully next year we can continue to move forward with that. You brought up a good point about using the commission as a liaison, which is excellent. I'd like to remind people though that they also can come in with a liaison, and if commissioners choose to be the liaison, that would be up to them. But if the citizens feels more comfortable with a family member, an attorney, or somebody else coming in with them, they can do that. They don't have to come in on their own. The other thing, when they do come in and make one of these requests or make one of these complaints, we're going to give them a copy of the complaint that day. We're going to give them our name, whoever the sergeant or lieutenant is that's taking the complaint, and then again we'll reach out to them in a matter of time after that as well. Good questions. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I have another question. You talked about the wellness coordinator. Could you explain a little bit about what that role is and what the supports they're providing for officers, and if there's supports that individual is providing for our community?
Yes, absolutely. So Dr. Samal Forkwards, he's going to be, like I said, embedded within the police department. He has an office here. He has been putting out some training guides for our officers, and then he'll be doing more mental health training for our new officers, with the belief that a healthy officer, both mentally and physically, is going to be a better officer. His trainings will be quite diverse, with what he's doing with new officers, from some personality testing to empathy training to mental health well-being training with them and with all of our officers as well. And then again, like I said, he, as far as community outreach, he is, just this week, we're going to start moving him kind of out with the officers and being more involved with the public. Up until this point, that hasn't been an option, but he's going to start riding with the officers and going to calls for service with those officers as well. So we'll have an officer and the mental health professional there together. However, he's not a full-time position. It's not someone that we're going to have 24/7, or even someone that we're going to have with our officers every day. Unfortunately, the grant that has him provided to the department is not as large as we would hope, and he's not going to be with us full time. But hopefully, as the years go on, we can bring him on for more time than what we have him right now.
That's really good, because I think that one of the things that we hear, just kind of in the bigger conversations of some things, is, you know, I think we talked about it in maybe the second meeting that we had with yourself and Chief Monroe, that, you know, some of the calls that our officers are responding to, I mean, I think there was an example that one of our officers responded to almost 6 suicides within the first 6 months of their job, and just what that does mentally, you know, to anybody, and making sure that we take care of the, you know, the holistic view of everybody in our community. So I guess I would just encourage the conversation to continue when we're looking at grants, that we're not only making sure that we're taking care of the mental health capacity of our law officers, but also, you know, I think our fire department probably sees really horrific things that affect them. You know, social workers, different people within our community need that mental health support, including the individuals in which we're responding to. So one of the conversations that we continuously hear is about having somebody within our police department that's trained either in social work or mental health support, so that when some of those calls come in, how can we respond to some things that maybe a social worker or somebody who is trained to support individuals with addictions are doing this outreach and responding to calls, because I can't expect every police officer to be trained in all of those capacities. So when we look at kind of the development of who we have in our law enforcement, are those conversations taking place? Do we have people in our law enforcement that are already trained, and those are the specific calls that they're going out to?
So the short answer is we're not looking to bring on somebody that's specifically trained for those duties onto the department, such as a social worker. But the longer answer would be that many of our officers have that specific training, if not all of our officers have the specific training, some to greater extent, some to lesser extent. For example, prior to coming on to law enforcement, I worked for Clay County Social Services for 5 years as a family advocate, working in the school districts, which brings maybe a different perspective than what some of the other officers had. We have multiple officers that have worked in juvenile corrections as counselors over with the regional detention center. But all of our officers continue to have crisis intervention training, de-escalation training, unconscious bias training. Those are trainings that we require, that the state requires, and not only requiring the training and going to the trainings, but they're trainings that are used every single day. Every day that an officer is in uniform, they're dealing with people that are in crisis, that have mental health or chemical health addiction issues, and they're working to try to address those issues and to get the individuals out of that situation or help them with whatever is going on for that day. So not only do they have the trainings, but they're using those trainings on a daily basis. It's one of the things that we have on our website is I believe it's called a call for service, or the daily calls for service tab, and it shows what the calls for service were for the prior day, the prior 3 days. I don't remember exactly how far it goes back, but it shows those calls for services. And if you look at them, you're going to see that there's a lot of calls that are coming out as disturbances, intoxicated individuals. These are calls that the public is calling about and that officers are responding to. And that's where the officers are using those de-escalation skills, the crisis intervention, and hopefully trying to resolve the issue as quickly as possible for the best result as possible.
Any other comments? Okay, we can move our next item, which will be training requested by Commissioner Keeler.
We don't have any callers yet. Okay. Okay, thank you, Sergeant Martin. I know that I also kind of want to set the tone for anybody new who's calling in that hasn't sat at Human Rights Commission meetings. These are conversations that we have pretty regular. It's the nice thing that we have done in the last year is bringing Sergeant Martin actually to the table with us so that we can have these kind of conversations. So I feel like it's a working, growing relationship. I don't want other people who are seeing this conversation to feel like this is brand new. It's one of the things that I think within our city we kind of do need to talk about, is the fact that we've been talking about the relationship between underrepresented populations and our law enforcement for the last year for sure. And working on how we can build that relationship, because I know that there was a time that Connie brought a concern with your community members and the way that we communicated with law enforcement. So I just want to make sure that on a public space, this is a relationship that we've been trying to work on for a while now. So Sergeant Martin, I appreciate your openness and the conversations that you have with us. I think that we are always looking to grow in those conversations. So I just want to make sure that you know how much we appreciate you being a part of this. I do want to talk about kind of next steps when it comes to the Human Rights Commission, and some ideas that I would like some of the other commissioners to give some feedback on. Kind of in the work that I do, even outside of this commission, talks a lot about our implicit biasness and how, we can do cultural sensitivity training all we want, but there's this part of implicit bias training that talks about who we are within ourselves and how we respond to things. And I think it's important, and one thing that I would like to kind of throw out to the group is, as a Human Rights Commission, what are our thoughts on kind of encouraging, starting with ourselves, because I feel like if we're going to encourage other people in our community to participate in trainings or implicit bias trainings, we have to be willing to do that ourselves. Because I know that we sit up here and we have, our own things to work on. I don't ever want to come across like we have it all figured out, because we definitely don't. But if there would be an opportunity to maybe as a commission make a recommendation to city council that our council and other commissions and other city leaders do some sort of implicit bias testing. Or I know that there's a program, IDI, which I know that we've talked to Mayor Judd about in other scenarios, but I would just like some feedback and start a conversation around that, because I think that implicit bias plays a big role in how we respond to situations. So I'm going to open it up for discussion, because I'd like to get everybody's feedback on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Keeler. Deb, do you have any question?
I have an update, but why don't I let some other people go first, and then I'll mention if there's anybody else.
Anyone else comment?
I guess I have a question, Heather. Are you asking us if we think that that's a good idea, or I guess I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's great. I'm not sure what it is that you are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that's something that we feel like is a good suggestion to try to present to city council to do. Is there other trainings that we know of individually? Like, I know that IDI and the Harvard Implicit, there's a bunch of testing and assessments out there. So maybe looking in the discussion, are there specific things that maybe you have heard of or you've used in situations that have been beneficial as well? It just gets really hard as a Human Rights Commission with not a lot of budget and just kind of a guiding commission on like what things can we bring to the city council as suggestions on what we feel like would be beneficial for our community moving forward. Did that answer your question to my question?
Kind of.
So yes, do you feel like it's...
I'm not aware of any trainings or anything like that that would be beneficial, but I don't think it hurts anybody to have more knowledge and training, ever.
Deb, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, yeah, so I just happened to be in an email conversation with the mayor about this today. So I think we're definitely on the same page. He is also interested in having the council and the commissioners be able to do something like this. I know he and I were talking about a few different ideas, and he also mentioned the IDI, and I've had a lot of experience with the IDI, and I do think it's a really useful tool. The other one that I'll mention, that I mentioned to him, is is the respectful conversations process training. And there's actually some folks in the area who do both of those, who do IDI and respectful conversations. And the nice thing is that, in my opinion, they pair well together, because the IDI is a individual assessment and allows you to sort of see where you're at and gives you some tools for self-improvement. But the respectful conversations process is also something that helps you prepare for how you bridge relationships with folks who may, on difficult conversations with, controversial topics. And I think having lived in the upper Midwest for 20 years, I think one of the things that we often struggle with is there are topics that, are really difficult to engage with other people, and we get really nervous about it. And so having some good tools for how we could have those helpful, productive conversations with others on some of these things that we're seeing in our community, I think would be really helpful. So I know I definitely support it, and I think, as I said, the mayor's on the same page, and I think he's having our incoming acting city manager explore the possibility of us doing something like that. I think we're at the point of looking at some budget issues. So that's what I have for now, but I think we're definitely on the same page.
Thank you, Deb and Mikhail. Any other comments on item number 8? Okay, we'll move item number 9, reports, announcement, any upcoming events? You say Deb?
Mr.
You
Chairman,
can go.
I have one.
Yep, sure, you can go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up that we are having Night to Unite in Moorhead. It's going to be October 6th this year, and there is a link on the Moorhead Police Department website under the campaigns and programs. So we will be having it. Again, it's October 6th this year, pushing it back 2 months.
Thank you, Chris. Deb, you may proceed.
Did you say my name? I didn't hear it.
Yeah, you have any comment?
Okay. Yes, I have a couple of events. One is tonight, so if anybody has time tonight at 7 o'clock, there is Conversations on Racism and Reconciliation, and that's hosted by Bethel Church, and that's a Zoom event. And tomorrow at 6:30, our mayor will be leading, it's called Leading the Conversation on Race and Faith. And it's being hosted by Lutheran Church of the Good Shepherd, and that's a Facebook Live event. Then on June 30th, Lake Agassiz Regional Library is hosting a speaker. It's historian Christopher Lehman, and he will be speaking on his book, which is Slavery's Reach, Southern Slaveholders in the North Star State. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, since a lot of us are staying at home and watching more television, that on Netflix, there's a really good new documentary. It's called Disclosure, and it looks at how the trans community has been portrayed in the media really over the last 100 years, and the impact that it's had on them. In particular, we've been looking at high rates of violence against trans and gender nonconforming individuals. And so definitely, if you're home watching something, looking for something on Netflix, that's a great program to watch. Thanks.
Thank you, Deb. Any other upcoming events?
I have one event, and it's kind of a call for volunteers as well. So I met with Sherry Larson with the Moorhead Business Association. You know, they're putting on the fireworks for the 4th of July, and just as a location change so that everybody knows, it's typically at MSUM, but it's going to be out by Horizon Shores now. And so one of the things that they're looking for is volunteers. And, you know, we kind of always say, like, when you get involved with your community, it just builds this kind of respect that you have for your own space, but also an opportunity to meet some other people. And so one of the things that they need are really just individuals to kind of stand in kind of the cutoff zone so that they make sure people don't go past this certain point. It's from 9:30 to 11:30. The pitch is that you probably have the best seat in the house when it comes to seeing the fireworks. And so I know that on the Moorhead Business Association Facebook and different things, there's places to sign up for that. And so I'm just gonna kind of put it out there that it might be a nice place for, if any of us are able to volunteer, or if we know of other people or other networks, to get them involved in like physically volunteering somewhere. Some of us might be looking for an opportunity to like actually get out and do something that's not behind a screen right now. So if you go to the Moorhead Business Association page, you can sign up to volunteer, and it's 9:30 to 11:30.
That's a big event. So do we have any upcoming event? Anyone have anything?
I do have one more event that's coming up.
You may proceed.
We had talked about it before, maybe possibly at our last meeting, I believe. We had a diversity job fair. The Moorhead Business Association, again, was sponsoring that. It was going to be down at the Marriott. I believe it was in March. That has now been rescheduled to September 23rd at the Marriott from 10 o'clock until 1 o'clock. There will be interpreters there and available as well. I don't have the list of interpreters for specific languages, but I know that the last time they had multiple that were lined up. And Commissioner or Chairman, I believe that you might have provided some of the information at the last meeting as well in regards to this one.
The diversity job fair?
Yes.
Sure. Any other upcoming events? Any comments?
Mr. Chair, I have two other things I wanted to mention. One, that we are still very much in need of election judges. And so if anyone is interested, we can share that information with them, and we need them for both the upcoming primary for Minnesota as well as for the general election in November. And I believe if they get enough people, that doesn't have to be a full day, but we really need people, in particular younger people, that we rely very much typically on people who are older, and unfortunately during COVID-19 they're in a high risk category. And so you do get paid to do it, I believe. So I'm looking at Lisa on the camera in case I'm wrong on that. And so it's a great community service to do. And the other thing I forgot I wanted to mention is just to thank Mikkel, our outgoing chair, for her work as the past chair of the Human Rights Commission, and thank Connie for taking over as our new chair.
Thank you, Deb. Any other event coming?
I have one last update. So as we kind of move forward and walk through what we probably consider one of the biggest civil rights movements in common history, Fargo-Moorhead is a community that is like this bigger community. And so as our Human Rights Commission, the Fargo Human Relations Commission has reached out to us to have kind of a greater conversation of how we can work collectively together as we move forward through some of these changes, as we've seen some of the peaceful protests and conversations that have been going on. Even though they physically have been located over in Fargo, we've had a really big turnout from our Moorhead population and our Moorhead leaders. And so we just thought that it kind of made sense for us to continue to work together in that capacity. So as far as the other commission members, I just wanted to kind of inform you that those might be emails. I think Josh has reached out to invite them to some of our talking circles. I know that they're doing talking circles on their own. And so the idea would be that after we've had opportunities to have our community members express some of their concerns and stories and conversations, that we would collectively come together, maybe early July, mid-July, to have a bigger conversation. So if you want to just kind of keep in touch with emails, Josh will continue to communicate all of that with you. I know that it's kind of a bigger commitment than what we've maybe obligated ourselves to, having all these community conversations, but I just think it's extremely important that we continue to be at the table as we're working through this in our community. So just a heads up on some of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kayla. Any other upcoming events or?
One I want to share.
Am I on? Okay. So I guess the last announcement that we will share is, so first I want to step back, and I feel like a lot of things have happened from the last time we were together. I think it was February was our last meeting. So not only did we launch into this massive pandemic, and then now we're in the civil rights movement, but I want to scale it back just a little bit with our own Human Rights Commission. One of our commissioners who in this community has done absolutely outstanding work and was really highly respected, Nate was our Ward 4 commissioner. And I know that for me, he really opened my eyes to a lot of things that maybe we just don't talk about a lot. I mean, and so he fell ill, I think, the end of the year, and then passed away late March. And so again, it kind of fell into that space where we couldn't acknowledge that very well because it was a time when COVID was really taking place. And so I just want to make the statement to Nate's family and the people who he had this huge impact on in this community, you know, how much we miss him in this conversation and just in this community. I feel like I couldn't move on to the next statement without at least acknowledging that. And so what that did on our commission is it's opened up the position for a new commissioner to join us who lives in Ward 4. Josh, did you say the application is open?
Yeah, it's open year round.
Yeah, so if you go to the Moorhead Human Rights Commission page, there will be an application form on there. I would strongly encourage as many people to apply. It's a year-round application, so anybody can consistently apply, so that we have that information on file. So I'm gonna put that out there, and then move to a second idea, if that's okay.
You go ahead.
Okay, so as we've been walking through a lot of this, one thing that was brought to my mind or my attention was so when the Human Rights Commission used to be in play, and then it kind of went on a pause, and then it came back, there used to be a youth individual at the table. That there was somebody in our community who was at a high school level who sat at the table as our youth liaison. And I'm not sure where in translation and kind of the rebuilding of the Human Rights Commission did we, like if there was this firm decision or if it just was kind of one of those things that we didn't reach back out to. But what I know of this community and what I know in general is our next generation wants to be involved, but also they deserve an opportunity to be at the table. And I think that it's important that we open that up as well. And so I don't know if it needs to be a motion that as the Human Rights Commission, we would like to add a youth position, or if it needs to be a different process. I'm sorry, Josh, if I'm kind of throwing you off board with this, but.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's a council appointment, so the Ward 4 council members will make the appointment. So I would say it's something you could bring to their attention. I believe it still is in the rules and procedures for the Human Rights Commission that it would be good to have a youth on there. So I think it's something you could bring to their attention.
Yeah, because I think what I'm saying is it would be two different positions. So we would have our Ward 4 as the adult, but then add a liaison, a youth liaison position who sits here and gives the youth input as well. So maybe if we open it up for discussion to see if that's something, and then what does that process look like, or how do we, I don't know if anybody else on the call would know like how we move forward with that. And then I do have one more thing I want to add to the,
Let me just say, I can find out and bring it to our next meeting what the process would be.
I mean, I guess if I'm the only commissioner that feels like that's important, it wouldn't be worth it. So maybe, is it something that other commissioners feel like would be of value to have you look into?
Yeah, Deb, you can go. Our time is up, but you can go ahead.
Sure, I agree, and I wondered, I had forgotten about that, but this was one of the few boards or commissions, I think maybe the only one that had a youth a member on it, and I don't know, that would be good, Josh, if you could find out for us, was that just a separate position from the representatives from each of the ward? And if it wasn't, I agree, I think that would be a nice thing to do, instead of sort of leaving it up to chance for one of the ward council members to appoint somebody for that seat, to always have somebody who's a liaison from our youth community would be, I think it'd be a nice thing to have.
Thank you. We need to respect everyone's time when we have one more item. Any new business? I'm sure no, because all the business are closed.
I have one new business.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we actually started this conversation, I don't know, in January when we were kind of talking about the calendar. So real quickly, a year ago, actually in June, the Human Rights Commission passed the motion to present Indigenous Peoples Day to City Council. And as we all know, that was passed, and now that is recognized at a city level. Well, then what we did is we moved, what's diversity,
Cultural Diversity
day to November. I think it's the second Saturday in November. And so what I would like to do, because again, it's a really important way to recognize history, is to potentially look at the motion to present the opportunity of celebrating as a city holiday Juneteenth within our city, because again, I think part of the inclusiveness of moving forward is being honest and being understanding about the history in which the threads of our country were built on. And it is kind of one of those other movements that's taking place to recognize and celebrate a really important culture and movement within our nation. And so I'm going to leave that there and see if we need a motion to proceed with presenting that as a recommendation to City Council.
Would you like me to just add that as an agenda item to the next meeting?
Sure.
I can say I recall that we spoke about actually getting in a speaker to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe we can invite somebody to come talk to the group and then have a discussion about that at the next meeting?
Sure, yeah, and Juneteenth is like June 19th, so now we have like a whole year to try to figure it out. So yeah, if we could get something on the next calendar, I just want to make sure that we plant that seed of conversation and know that that's going to be something that I feel like is really important in our community. I think that's all that I have. Thank you.
I will ask the commissioners if anybody has a suggestion for somebody to bring in to discuss that, please share that with me.
Thank you. Before I close, any other comment?
Mr. Chairman, can I make one comment?
Sure.
It'll be very brief. I just quickly looked up the HRC rules of practice and procedure, and inside of it, it says of the 7 appointed members, mayor and city council should strive for membership diversity by appointing 1 student member aged 12 to 18 years of age, 3 member representatives of marginalized population, and others which have been historically discriminated against. And then it does have some more information, but there is specific verbiage for youth aged 12 to 18 requesting that they be appointed.
Thank you, Krish. Any other comment?
Mr. Chair, this is Dan Molly. Can I make one comment?
You're welcome, man.
Thank you. So I'm Dan Molly, the Assistant City Manager for a couple of more days, and I see Chris Bolkers, City Manager Chris Bolkers, is still on the line. And so I just wanted to say thank you to Chris. We're so grateful for your time in Moorhead, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for joining us here this evening. City leaders, bodies, liaison, our commissioners, and my vice. So thank you everyone for joining us. And our meeting is
Thank you.
closed.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.